All right, welcome everybody. My name is Kelsey Redkey. I'm here as editor of the Daily Chronicle with Shaw Media, here with my colleague Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Bauman, managing editor of the Daily Herald.
And we're here with the candidates for the 70th House, the 70th Districts in the House of Representatives. If you each would like to introduce yourselves and tell us a little about why you're running, we'll start with Jeff.
Okay, so I am the current state representative for the 70th District. I'm a small business owner, husband, father of three. I've got a daughter in college, a son in high school, and another son in middle school. I first ran for election because I saw what was happening in Illinois with the contentious environment and atmosphere. And one of the things that kept me grounded was I was raised by a single mom who waited tables keeping a roof over our heads, right? There were multiple times where we had the mortgage company calling or the electricity on the verge of being shut out. And through her perseverance and her ability to show us the way, I became a first-generation college graduate, and NIU offered that to me. My two sisters, I'm very proud to say, are also now NIU graduates, and they've gone off to amazing things. So when I saw the impact that NIU was having and our immediate area was having as a result of where Illinois was up to 2018, I felt like it was time to step up, and they needed a good leader who could reach across the aisle and get things done and get things accomplished. And we've seen plenty of that since then. We've gotten money, $53 million towards deferred maintenance on NIU's campus. We've helped secure the Health IT building, which is a new building that will allow all the health sciences for NIU to be consolidated under one roof. With the passage of the Republican budget compromise at the end of 2019, DeKalb County, I'm very proud to say, is going to be the new home of the 11th data center that Facebook is opening, as well as the passage of the manufacturer's purchase credit, which allowed, in part, for Ferrara Candy to choose DeKalb as a distribution and manufacturing center. Additionally, the extension of the R&D tax credit that was part of that package is allowing Syngenta Seeds, recently announced, to develop an R&D facility in Malta, Illinois. So all of these things have come to fruition, in addition to passing some wonderful bipartisan bills that expanded breast screenings for mammograms for women that in diagnostic situations weren't always being covered by their insurance company. I helped pass a bill that kept diabetics insulin prescriptions to $100 or less for out-of-pocket on a monthly basis. And in addition to that, we have worked amazingly well across the aisle because as a Republican, we are in the super minority in the Illinois House. So there's 44 of us and there's 74 Democrats. So by definition, absolutely everything that I want to get passed in the Illinois legislature or that I want to have done happens through bipartisan negotiation and compromise. And you've seen that happen time and again in my record if you look back. So I'm excited to stand up and run for a second term. I think Illinois is at a different crossroads today than we found it in 2019. The challenges are great, but Illinois is an amazing place. We sit at the crossroads of this country. Whether you're looking at air, rail, roads, river, farming, manufacturing, wonderful education institutions, Illinois has the potential to be an amazing place, and I want to use my efforts to help get us there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And Paul, what about you?
So my name's Paul Stoddard. I'm running for the second time for the same seat, the 70th District in the Illinois House of Representatives. I longtime geology professor at Northern. I retired at the end of 2017. And I'll say that going through school and getting trained as a geologist and as a scientist more generally taught me a great respect for data and for analysis and for coming up with conclusions to situations and problems that are based on facts and not ideology. One of the things I've always noticed, though, is our politics is not run the same way. We have people and parties that are more interested in gaining and keeping power than they are in actually serving the people that they're supposed to serve. This has always rankled me, and I've always seen this at every level, from Congress down to state houses, down to county boards and city councils. One of the things I've noticed is the majority party always holds all the committees, or if they decide to be generous, they might give a committee or two to the minority party, but they basically control everything. And when we have very narrowly decided majorities, like we do in Congress, like we typically do in DeKalb County, it always struck me as unfair that the minority party, be it Democrat or Republican, should have a number of seats, number of committees proportional to their representation on the full board or full Congress or whatever it was. And so when I first got elected to the DeKalb County Board about 13 years ago, one of the very first things I did is said, let's change the way we divide up committees. The Democrats were in the majority at the time, one of the earlier times that they had managed to get the majority in DeKalb County. I got some pushback from senior leadership in my own party, who said, as soon as the Republicans get power, they'll undo everything you just did. And I said, I don't care. This is the right thing to do. We managed to get that passed. And now the committees are split up 4-3 typically, because we usually have a 13-11 or 11-13 or 12-12 board. I am very happy to say that neither party has ever suggested undoing that, although both have had the majority in those 12 years. And the reason for that is it works. It's fair and it works. Since I've been on the DeKalb County Board, since we actually put that system into place, the board has become a lot less partisan. And now we have 24 people, different backgrounds, different philosophies, different ideas about the best way to proceed, but they all sit down, they listen to each other, they take each other's concerns to heart, and we try to craft solutions that benefit everybody in the community. That's what politics is supposed to be. I was very happy to see that work, to get the chance to implement that and see it work at the DeKalb County Board level. And that's the type of thinking and action I want to bring down to Springfield. That, I've got about 5 other proposals that are designed to help spread out power, keep it from being so centralized as it is today, that'll make government much more representative. The state today is facing some very, very serious challenges, new ones, in addition to our financial issues that have been ongoing for years, certainly since the '08 crash. But now we've got COVID to look at. We need people who can make decisions based on the science, based on what's best for the people, the health of the people of Illinois. We've got Black Lives Matters and all the racial justice issues that have come to the fore. We need people who can sit down and talk to police, to members of the Black community, to members of all the communities, and work out solutions. We need people who are willing to go and listen to the stories that are being told by the BLM crowd. The local people here in DeKalb have in charge of the protests or have been staging the protests, I have found have been very professional about this. They've worked with the police to make sure everything goes smoothly, non-violently. Other than that first evening where some outside actors, I think, were trying to take advantage of a situation, we've had nothing but peaceful, respectful protests here. And the stories that are being told at these protests are really gut-wrenching. And you know, as a white member of the community, I was shocked to hear that these types of things are still going on. And we need to take action. And so I've proposed that the DeKalb County employees, the board members, citizens in general be offered implicit bias training. I've suggested it to the mayor of DeKalb as well, who I think is following up on that. So we need solutions to these problems. We need people who are willing to step up, be part of the community, and take these concerns to places where they can be addressed.
And I should mention too, just for our viewers who will see this, Paul is our Democrat candidate and Jeff is our Republican candidate. For the questions, as we go through them, if we could just try and limit the answers to about 3 minutes. I am keeping time, but I won't, I'll be respectful about that too. So,
Can you give a hand wave at 2 minutes,
yeah,
30
I
seconds?
absolutely
So
will. You bet. You bet. So, both of you mentioned, rightly so, that there are quite a lot of new challenges facing not just our community, but the state and the country in general, obviously with the pandemic. Can we bring that down a little to our district, and give you guys both the opportunity to talk a little about what you feel are the biggest struggles facing the 70th district, and especially now in 2020, how do we go about fixing that? So we'll let Paul answer this one first.
So this is obviously an extraordinarily difficult problem. I mean, if it were easy, we'd have the answers already. So we've got two things I think that we really need to be worried about. One is the health of our citizens, and the other is the health of our small businesses. These two things are not either or situations. If we have an unhealthy populace, the business community is not going to be very healthy either. We need to have people people need to be able to feel that they can safely go out, patronize our local businesses, and so forth. I was very happy to see people step up when the pandemic first hit with all the eating, ordering food in and so forth. That's helped keep a lot of our restaurants afloat and so forth. I think, the original lockdown was difficult, but it was necessary. I would have not been quite so draconian about it. I think small businesses should have been allowed to stay open as long as they practiced masking and social distancing protocols. I think we could have kept more of those small businesses open. Bars and restaurants are very, very difficult because you have a fair number of people in an enclosed indoor space. This is probably the best type of place for the virus to move from one person to another. You obviously can't be masked while you're eating and drinking. Most people don't want to be masked while they're sitting at a table talking with their friends. This is a very difficult situation. Fortunately, several of our restaurants have been able to move to outdoor dining, at least during the summer and hopefully into the fall. But obviously, as winter comes, that's going to be a problem. We are hardy in the Midwest, but I don't know how many people want to shovel snow off their dinner plates. Personally, I think, we need to really take this seriously. If people took a certain amount of personal responsibility, practiced social distancing, wore their masks, we could open up a lot more than we have. I heard this morning an estimate that, if 80% of us were wearing masks whenever we were out with other people, we could stop this thing.
You have 30 seconds.
Certainly. Thank you. So basically, I'd like to see us practice a bit more personal responsibility. I want to see system out of work because of the pandemic. We need to help those people make ends meet through the short term, hopefully not very long term with this, in order to keep things moving. And I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
All right, and Jeff, same question. Largest issues in your opinion facing the district, and how do we address them?
Yeah, thank you. So obviously the number one headline this year is COVID and the impact that it's had. I have given, since the onset of this, kudos to our governor for helping mitigate and reduce the amount of infections that we had in Illinois, because we were definitely on a trajectory of being in a very bad place, similar to New York. And had he not stepped in to do some shutdowns and some activities initially, we would be in a much better or much worse place. So I give him kudos, but I also give pushback, right? I mean, we have had significant problems. There's not, now it's a couple times a week, but up until July, there wasn't a day that goes by in my state office where I don't have someone like Gerald, who called last week, who can't put food on the table because he's unemployed and he can't secure a return phone call from IDES. And we initially in April pushed aggressively on the governor to expand either through temporary employees or having other government employees who weren't working come in and help the good people at IDES, the unemployment services. Because resoundingly so, the feedback that we get from people that interact with unemployment is fantastic. They love them. The people have empathy. They're caring. They're wonderful people. They needed help because of the onslaught. And we were very disappointed that we didn't see the governor provide that type of protection. Additionally, I will push back on the governor consistently, like I did early on with how he declared some businesses essential and others not. If we look at 1,000 people a day going through a Walmart checkout line, there is no way he is going to convince me that that is more safe and sanitary than a dozen people through a downtown boutique in one of these small towns. And so what we consistently see, especially in the 70th district, that is filled and populated with Main Street downtown boutiques and stores and restaurants, that those are being sacrificed at the altar of the big box stores, and that needs to stop. And so we have pushed aggressively for that to be resolved. The other aspect is healthcare. You know, getting Governor Pritzker in our district last month to sign my bill expanding mammogram coverage for diagnostics was a coup as a freshman male Republican, right? Especially in the super minority. But now we're running into a problem where people are fearful of going to their doctors and receiving those regular scans on a regular basis, whether it's for breast cancer or colon cancer or other systemic issues that they're encountering. And that's pushing, unfortunately, it's deferring and pushing those issues in a more severe direction, and we need to address that right away. And then we run into some of the outdoor activities. You know, there is such a mental health aspect for what we're all going through right now. And for those that are watching or the four of us, there are definitely mental health challenges that we're dealing with, just coping with our new environment. And the way that we do that is having that communal nature, talking, visiting, having a good time in a socially responsible way, like you can with athletics. So one of the other areas about camping and boating and that type of thing, where you're outside and you're participating with others, is critical. One of the things I would like to see the governor work on and do is allow the IHSA broader authority in establishing rules for practicing fall sports and winter sports. If we trust our experts, and this is one of my biggest problems that we have with government right now, we should trust our experts. We should trust the people that we entrust in those roles to come back to us with proposals to operate within a certain set of parameters safely and effectively, and offer these kids that are on lockdown a chance to get a little bit of mental health by getting some physical activity and interacting in a socially responsible, distant way with their friends and peers in school.
Can I jump in with a question here?
Yeah, you bet.
Please.
I think it was on Friday, there was a pretty sizable protest in DuPage County, outside your district, yeah, from parents and students who want back in the schools. And we're seeing several of those lined up for this week in Barrington, in St. Charles. I think there was one in McCook over the weekend. It seems like we're going to see an avalanche of protests to try to get back into the classrooms. And I know that some of the districts had said, we'll come back mid-October. Paul, we'll start with you. What's your position on this? Is that, are we pushing it?
So, you know, I certainly understand the desire to get kids back in school. Parents have jobs. They want to be able to go back to work. They want to be able to ensure that they can put food on the table for those kids. Daycare is very difficult at this time. But we also have to keep in mind that, the health of our students, the health of their parents, the health of our teachers, the health of the people, the staff in those schools is also of paramount importance. And kids, even though evidence that they themselves are not as subject to the severe conditions of COVID, but they are carriers, even if they don't get it, even if when they get it, it's a mild case. But they're going to bring that home to their parents, to their grandparents, to the people they interact with. The younger kids especially, but even the college kids, we're seeing on the news parties and things of people behaving in close quarters, not masked, they're not taking responsibility. And the younger you are, the less likely it is that you're going to have that mindset. I don't expect 5-year-olds to understand that they have to wear a mask all the time when they're playing with their friends. Even if they understand it, they generally don't remember that that's important. So it's a delicate balance, and a lot of school districts are trying to find that balance. They're trying to say we can bring in some kids, we can disperse them a bit more so that the density of kids isn't as great. We can try to minimize the net effect here that we're having. I leave it up to the school districts, to the parents and teachers who have the best feel for the conditions that they can create in their schools to try to keep the schools as safe as possible. Some districts have problems where, when we're doing remote learning, that involves internet and a computer, and not everybody has access to those things. This is a big issue. For school districts that want to go that route, I think the state needs to be able to help them out and make sure, I think the state has a responsibility to all the students to make sure that they have equal opportunities in education. And in these times of COVID, if that means making sure that they have internet access and a computer someplace that they can get to in their homes, in the local library, whatever, we need to make sure that that's happening. We need to make sure that if the schools are not deemed safe enough for kids to go back, that there are alternatives so that families can figure out how to make this work if they can't trust the schools with their children for 6-8 hours a day because of health concerns, valid health concerns. So it's not an easy question. Again, COVID is not presenting us with a lot of easy alternatives. I think we need to work to find the best solutions possible. And that means working with everybody, listening to the concerns the parents have, listening to the concerns the teachers have about being able to do their job. If they're sick and can't come in, the students aren't going to be learning anyway. So let's try to get everybody at the table together and figure out the best way to address these issues.
Jim, thank you for the question. And the first thing I would say is paramount, especially with what we're going on this. We have to look after the health and safety of our educators. And we need to make sure that we have an avenue where those educators that are potentially vulnerable or going in vulnerable situations are allowed to work with kids in a virtual environment, right? We need to do that. We don't ever want to put somebody at risk. But we need to do that through local control. We need local school boards to be able to function. And one of the biggest challenges that we've had through this whole COVID, and you've seen me repeatedly ask for this, is the Illinois legislature has been cut out of the process. Early on we were talking about the 30-day renewable rule. The Illinois legislature, especially uniquely the House, is there to be a voice of the people. And right now we're in a situation where the governor is making decisions single-handedly, which is fine. But the context of the feedback that the legislators are getting and the influence that would have on where we're going should absolutely be incorporated. And the fact that Speaker Madigan and the governor have chosen not to engage the legislature is a problem that I have. One of the other challenges that I have is the Illinois Department of Public Health is an amazing institution, and they have done wonderful work at keeping us informed. The challenge that we have, and you saw that when school districts were reopening and thinking about reopening in July and then in August, is there was repeated delays or alterations in the rules that these schools had to abide by. And that's just not fair. If there are changes because of scientifically proven dangers, we certainly need to make folks aware. but we can't keep altering rules so that school districts like Sycamore were left without a decision able to be made in an effective way and keep parents informed so that they had the proper channels to be able to direct their kids afterwards. One of the other problems that I had that I've been pushing on a regular basis is if our true goal is to limit the spread of this horrible COVID-19, we're approaching it the wrong way with the alternate school days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That is entirely wrong. If you look at it from a scientific standpoint and the spread of the germs, it would be a much wiser approach to have cohort A there Monday through Friday, week 1, and cohort B there Monday through Friday on week 2, and on the alternating weeks doing self-study or virtual environment. What you've done then is you've kept that cohort A and B from spreading it through touching handles, breathing the air, going in and out of restrooms and lockers and doors, so that you also then have a buffer of 2 days on either side of the week before that next cohort is in the building, and you can warn people off. You have a much better opportunity of stopping a horrible spread, because if Jimmy gets sick on a Thursday afternoon, cohort B, you can clean the building, get everything ready by Monday morning, and then cohort A is the one that you need to watch, and those students aren't coming back into the environment. So we've mitigated the spread. We also need to look at considering how that impact is going back to the mental health on these students. And that's not just for athletics. I talked a little bit about football, and I think we should allow the local districts to control what their students are doing in the way of sports and other activities. We need to broaden these students' mind in a collegial way where they can interact with their peers one-on-one. And we need to allow those local school districts the breadth to make those decisions. You know,
and I'm just going to say like 30 seconds.
Okay, one of the things that I love about local decisions is there's also local ramifications. So my daughter's school, where she's away at college, said early on to everybody, listen, this is a serious virus. This is absolutely something that we are not going to stand for. If there's parties, if there's unsafe environments, you guys are gone. And you know what? That first weekend, there was a party, and my understanding is now 50 students have been sent home on academic suspension. They're just not a part of campus anymore. And so we need to couple opportunity with rules and parameters and allow local units of government to flourish in a time where, frankly, they can be most responsive if they've been given the right protocols over time.
And I'm going to do a follow-up to that, actually, now that you brought that up. Obviously, as of Friday, the IDPH has listed DeKalb County as under warning. Part of that, according to the county health department, has to do with NIU, the rising cases on campus, largely students instead of employees. I believe the count is over 150 cases. And so as of Friday also, the classes are going to be online only for 2 weeks, I think in an effort, again, to mitigate that spread. A lot of it was talking about enforcement of, non-parties, no parties in the hallway, no gatherings in like lounges and dormitories. Is that something that you both support? What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the IDPH regulating warnings to counties in general? We'll do Paul first at the last question. Let's do Jeff first.
So I think that is a perfect example and illustration of what I was talking about consequences and parameters, right? NIU has stepped in because we've had a spike with students coming back on campus, and they're operating within parameters that are well known by the student body, by the administration, and assisted with not only IDPH, but the wonderful people at the DeKalb Health Department as well. And what that's allowed NIU to do is to be adaptable and responsive to an ever-changing environment. And in speaking to them last week when this spike was coming around and we knew, to your question, Kelsey, I think it's highly important that we do have that metric that the IDPH has set out where we do have a warning status. Because now we know that we're in a danger zone and we can act with more caution or we can pull things back. And that's the type of temperature gauge we need to have in place so that we know what to do as a culture individually, but also in those group settings like schools, activities, places of business, and of course, NIU and Kishwaukee College. The challenge that we have at that point, when we have a couple bad actors and we go into a warning status, is we follow up with what I said about consequences. I was very impressed to see the NIU administration reach out to the local chambers of commerce and the local landlord association and say, hey guys, this is bad for all of us if we get shut down and send everybody home. So now what you've seen is you've seen a collective response of invested individuals in solving the problem and having a greater awareness. So those businesses can be more diligent at making sure everybody's in compliant with their masks, so that the landlords can make sure there aren't any house parties that go unchecked, so that the local businesses can continue to operate and have an income, so that we don't have more people waiting on phone lines to get a hold of the Illinois Unemployment Services. So I think it's a highly appropriate metric. I would like to see some other added metrics to the process regarding hospitalizations and the bigger numbers there, because when we go by the positive tests, it's of course just from those that we've conducted. And so there's people as they're going through the process of being ill where they're being tested multiple times, and then we have everybody showing up at NIU getting tested. So I'm worried about a skew in the numbers. So we need a stable environment, a stable set of metrics that we can look at going forward, not only as an area, but as a society. Thank you.
And Paul, same question about the IDPH warning and NIU spike in cases.
Well, yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, you know, most people in the area, when I go out to grocery stores or whatever, are, you know, following the protocols. They are masking. Most people are wearing them properly over the nose and over the mouth. You know, I don't see a lot of violation of that. You know, but again, we have a lot of people, a lot of younger people coming in. They're living in dorms, which in and of themselves is a bit problematic. NIU has taken the step of trying to reduce, again, the population density in those dorms, keep people spread out more, encourage people to practice good protocols. But again, you know, people are, you know, especially young people, tend to be more socially gregarious. They want to get out. They want to be with friends. You know, in an ideal situation, we want to encourage that. We want people to interact. We want them to be talking and sharing their experiences and so forth. But these are different times, and it's very difficult to get young people, especially, to understand the danger that they're posing to the rest of the community, especially if they're in kind of an isolated quasi bubble. They say, well, you know, if we get each other infected, we're young, we're not going to get seriously sick, it's all okay. But it does drive our numbers up. And, you know, so I think NIU is trying to be proactive as best they can. You know, and I think it was a good step to make the classes virtual for the next 2 weeks. It does pose a hardship on the faculty who have to, I mean, it's not trivial to take a lecture and put it online. Now, I know they've been working on that all summer because they knew that this day was coming, but still it does impose on the faculty. But that's what the faculty generally don't mind. They understand, and their first love is teaching. So whatever it takes to teach. We just need, you know, as best as possible to keep an eye on things. We need really access to more and faster testing. Getting tested and waiting 3 days to find out that you're negative and somebody sneezes on you before that test result comes back, the test doesn't matter. We need faster tests. I'm encouraged by the U of I test that they're developing, and hopefully we'll get that out to the rest of the state soon. But we need to be able to do fast testing if we really want to get a handle on this, and so we can isolate cases and make sure people are quarantining and not spreading. And if you don't have symptoms, you don't know that you're spreading it. You certainly don't feel like you're spreading it. And so you generally don't take all the precautions you probably should be. So we need to have access to more and faster testing.
Can I enter a new minefield here?
Mm-hmm.
So local property taxes are I don't think any one of us would disagree that they are high in Illinois, and there's always about them going higher, and that they're really the primary funding source for public education in Illinois. What should be done to manage those taxes, and is the graduated income tax the way to go? Paul, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you. Yes, we do pay more on property taxes than anybody else, and that is because we use property taxes, local property taxes, to fund our school system. We rely more on property taxes for that than any other state by far. Not only does this put a huge burden on landowners, business owners, but it also creates an inherently unfair educational system. I said at the beginning, we want everybody to have access to quality education. That's the way we break poverty cycles. That's the way people have the chance to make the most for themselves, to pursue what they want, and so on and so forth. So we need for people to be able to get that. When we have poor school districts, when we have poor neighborhoods whose tax base, property tax base is low, they are not going to be able to afford to provide the same quality of education as some of our better to do neighborhoods. So we need to revamp our school funding system. And we need to, therefore, that would allow us to reduce the burden from property tax and allow us to lower the property taxes. We instituted a funding system several years ago that allows for a much more equitable dispersal of state funds going where it's needed. But we need to fund that so that the state can actually disperse that enough money to guarantee quality education to every student in the state. I think a graduated income tax is an essential part of that. Frankly, I think we need to really take a serious look at the entire taxing structure in the state. I'd like to see a ground up reformatting of our revenue stream. Our economy has changed. The sectors where we're providing jobs are different than they were 50, 100 years ago. We need to rethink our tax structure. Part of that is the graduated income tax. This will give us the flexibility to address some of these other issues. I would have preferred that we actually directly link property tax relief to the graduated income tax, but that's not going to be part of the amendment. That's got to be part of everything else, but that goes after the amendment gets passed. But I think we need to designate some of the money from some of the additional revenue from the graduated income tax towards property tax relief. Ultimately, I'd like to really, again, rethink this and maybe see different brackets, higher brackets. The Republicans are now spouting off how I proposed higher brackets before the legislature came through with theirs 2 years ago. But that was with the thought that we could use those extra revenues to reduce property taxes on those people who are paying excessive amounts. One of the things to remember is, in our tax structure, the people who are leaving the state aren't really the very well off. To them, the state offers many wonderful opportunities, and they are happy to be here to take advantage of those opportunities. I've lived in places like Denver where taxes and prices are high, and people say, well, that's just for the privilege of living here. I think people should feel that it's a privilege to live in Illinois with all that we have to offer. So people who can afford to pay a bit more should be asked to pay a bit more. The people who are leaving are people in the middle and lower end whose tax bills are high enough that they really can't afford them. Those people need tax relief. And in order to give those people tax relief without seriously damaging our revenue stream to be able to provide the services, the infrastructure changes, the educational opportunities we need to be able to provide, we need the flexibility of a graduated income tax. Give people at the lower end relief, ask people who benefit more from what the state has to offer, who can afford to
You're
pay
over
more.
your time, Paul, just so you know.
All right, thank you. I'm done.
I'm okay with him going on because it's really two of the bigger issues we're dealing with. So if we want to expand time, I'm okay with that.
Thanks, Jeff, but I think I made most of the points I needed to make.
Okay.
If you say something totally, well, you will say stuff different because I know this is one of the areas we definitely disagree on. But yeah, if Kelsey and Jim want to let us go at it for a while, I'm good with that too.
So
Jeff, go ahead.
As we break this down, I have a rule of holes. I don't know if you've ever heard this analogy before, but when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging, right? And that's step one. Illinois cannot continue to tax its way out of the hole that it's found itself in. So when we look at the Republican bill compromise that we passed in 2019 and the economic incentive injectors, our district, DeKalb County specifically, has one of the most banner perfect wins from that opportunity that's out there. So Tom Demmer and myself worked aggressively to install the data center incentive package in 2019. We were denied until we had an opportunity with Madigan wanting Republican votes and the governor wanting Republican votes on his first budget that he passed. So we were able to work on a bipartisan way to put the data center incentive bill that we've been stymied on getting to that point in time into legislation. We were able to get the manufacturer's purchase credit into legislation. We were able to get the Blue Collar Jobs Act into legislation. We were able to get the expansion or extension on the R&D tax credit. All of these things coupled together have allowed Facebook and Ferrara Candy First to locate in DeKalb City, arguably the city that needs the biggest shot in the arm in our district. And I have worked hard at making sure DeKalb has the opportunity to do that. So over the first 20 years, after the tax abatements, post any incentives that the local districts are giving, these two projects will yield $62 million over 20 years to our local taxing bodies to help put downward pressure on the overtaxation that we currently see in this area. So growing our way out is key one, making sure that we have job creators who not only are able but want to locate in the state of Illinois. That's what we need to be after. We can also look at the pension consolidation bill that we passed last November, where by putting the police and fire pension systems under an IMRF similar setup, we have allowed a tax relief to the local tax bodies in the state of Illinois of between $800 million and $2 billion a year net of returns. So even after returns, good, bad, or indifferent, it is allowing very small municipalities like we have in our area to invest in higher yield instruments instead of a 0.5% bond that isn't going to cut it when a police officer or a firefighter retires. So things like that that add to our bottom line are the things that we need to do. The question that I have back to people when they ask about the grad tax, do you trust the Illinois legislature to do what they're going to say with it? That's the heart of the issue right there. And if we look at what that grad tax at full implementation will yield, it's about $3.6 billion, okay? Fiscal year 3.6. If you look at our governor's spending priorities, the number I believe is $6.2 billion. And this year we're deficit spending $7 billion. So my question again is, how long is the integrity of these rates where allegedly 97% of people won't pay more are going to hold? And it's that basic dishonesty with the Illinois taxpayer. And again, I take issue with when Paul says our revenue stream and it'll increase revenues and it'll help revenues. Those revenues are other people's money. People are sick and tired of how Illinois is spending their money, and that's the core of the trust. That's the core of the issue that we have going on in Illinois right now. And so as soon as we have a mind shift where we understand those revenues we're spending are other people's money, and we need to treat it with the respect that that entails, we'll wind up in the same place that Madigan has held us over the last almost 40 years, right? 35, 40 years. So.
Thank you very much.
And to piggyback off that too, you know, obviously with the pandemic and the economic effect that we have seen right now and can foresee, you know, in the future, what do you foresee as the impact on the state's budget this year, the economic outlook in general, and you know, going off of taxes? Do you foresee increase in taxes in order to combat what we can assume are going to be shortfalls in the budget due to the pandemic? And we'll do Jeff first on this one.
Okay. So one of the biggest issues that we have, again, is we have allowed a budget to be passed in the state of Illinois that counts on a wing and a prayer, right? That we passed a budget that is hopeful that the feds will offer us money. And we didn't force any diligent conversations on how we spend. And that pension example is a perfect example of where we can find efficiencies. Reducing mandates on teachers in the classroom and administrators so that they can spend better time with the students is part of that. Yes, this pandemic is going to devastate our economy. And I go back to my rule of holes. Let's stop digging. Let's allow local businesses within safe parameters to reopen so that their livelihoods are protected for them and the families that they put food on the table for that are working for them. And that's what we need to be focused on. As we look to the impact on the state, I like to go back to a story that I encountered in the Higher Education Appropriations Committee during 2019. So during 2019, we spent 22 hours in the Higher Education Appropriations Committee going line by line on each item in the higher education budget. We spent as a committee 22 hours and we cut. And we cut the budgets. We cut things like the SIU Daily Egyptian newspaper. For some reason, we still pay for SIU's newspaper to be in publication. That was an old pork project that should easily be done away with. We looked at removing incentives that the schools had for business parks that were in there. And then we saw things like the University of Illinois at Chicago Dental School, and we actually wanted to expand that. But at the end of the day, what we did, we wanted to expand it because it serves inner city kids who don't have access to dental care, by the way. At the end of the day, we cut that budget on a bipartisan basis. Everybody around the table gave diligent and due conversation, and we got a budget that was trimmed for higher education last year. And then we had the April surprise where we had additional $1.5 billion show up in Illinois because of the national taxing laws that changed that impacted those revenues. And so all of a sudden, we no longer needed to cut. So the Republican proposal when we came back to that is, listen, we've spent 22 hours trimming this budget where it needs to be. Let's start from there and reward these institutions on how they've succeeded and in areas they need help instead of across the board. Unfortunately, that 22 hours of diligent time that the entire committee spent was wiped out in less than 15 minutes by two Democrat peers who walked in and said, no, you know what we're going to do? We're going to restore all the cuts that we made. We're going to add 5% and we're done. Let's call a vote. We were completely caught off guard. Completely caught off guard. How, after all that time, doing what the taxpayer sends us to Springfield to do, being good stewards of their dollars, do we then just obliterate it because all of a sudden the money shows up? And that's the dynamic that we need to correct in Illinois. and those questions haven't been forced, and when they have, they've been wiped out.
And Paul, same question about the state budget and coronavirus impacts and whether you foresee tax increases because of it.
So, these situations, the downturn in '08, now COVID, present a double whammy to the state. They decrease our revenues. We're not making as much in sales tax and so forth. And they also increase our demand on services. People are out of work. People have rent and mortgage payments they have to make that they can't. Every section of the economy, almost every section of the economy tends to suffer. We'd like to be able to help them, but we have less money to be able to do so with. So again, not an easy problem to solve. Yes, we should cut waste. We don't need to be paying for SIU's student newspaper. I know NIU's paper has gone to fewer editions each week for financial reasons. With change in media going from print to online, it's a changing world, and people certainly need to be able to adapt. But we're not going to be able to solve our budget problems by merely cutting waste. There's as much waste as we like to think there is. Our budget problems are a lot bigger than that. We need to really take a serious look at the whole thing. Yes, the pandemic is going to affect our bottom line. We are not going to make as much money. And taxing people who are making less money seems very counterintuitive and counterproductive, to be honest with you. The very people we want to be able to help, we shouldn't be asking them to help. Again, a graduated tax might allow us to ask people who can afford it, who aren't suffering as much, to help cover for those who are suffering more. Again, it's a matter of flexibility with that graduated income tax. Borrowing is an option. I hate it. It's not great, but there are times when unique circumstances cause the need to borrow. People borrow. You buy a house, there's a pretty good chance you're borrowing money to do that. You buy a car, there's a pretty good chance you're borrowing money to do that. You have a serious health concern, as the state, as the country, as the world does now, chances are you might have to borrow money to help pay those bills. And I think that's kind of where the situation that we're in now. We don't want to do that, but what are our options? Tell people, sorry, we can't help you make your rent, you're out on the street. Tell people you're going to have to pay us more, and oh, by the way, now you can't pay your rent, so you're out on the street. These are not good options either. Those are, in my mind, worse options. To touch on something Jeff said a little earlier, people, don't like paying taxes. Nobody really looks forward to April 15th and writing a check. But what people really like is not knowing where that money is going. And one of the things I think we need to do at the state level is be much clearer about how the money is being spent and where the money is coming from. You can go online and you can get the budget and you can get 8,000 lines and try to work your way through with a fine-tooth comb to find areas of waste and this and that. And then we can have discussions. We need to cut the budget. We need to cut this. We need to cut that. Nobody really has a good feel for what those cuts actually mean. What services are we going to lose specifically when we make those cuts? If we raise taxes, who are those taxes specifically going to be on, and so on and so forth. We need to make a user-friendly presentation of our budget. Pie charts. Here's 40% of your budget, and I'm making up numbers here. These are not meant to be real. 40% of the budget goes to healthcare, 30% goes to infrastructure, 20% goes to education, 10% goes to other things. And then if you're interested, well, out of that 30% or 20% I said goes to education, click on that pie slice and, well, X percent goes to higher ed, click on that, Y percent goes to U of I, Z percent goes to NIU, et cetera, et cetera. Let people break down, get into the weeds that they want to get into, and see where they think different choices should be made. And then we can have an informed discussion about our budget, pros and cons on cuts and taxes. Um, Otherwise we're playing ideological games. I mean, Jeff's example of somebody coming in and saying, well, it looks, I want to be a pro-education person, so I'm going to get rid of all those nonsense cuts you had. That's not the right way to say that. Cuts of nonsense material that you had, and yeah, let's make an increase by 5%. I don't know the specifics of that, but it certainly sounds bad. I'd like to know the names of the two Democrats who made that proposal. Maybe afterwards, Jeff, you can tell me. But we need to be as transparent as possible. Jeff is right. It's the people's money. They need to have as good a feel as possible for where that money is coming from and where it's being spent. And I think when you do that, you can get more buy-in for programs that are important. We can find out which programs people don't, and that should be deciding where to make and where we need to invest more.
All right, and I think we have time for one more question. I'm going to switch gears here. Gosh, 2020, so many big, hard-hitting topics. Obviously, in the midst of all of this, we've had renewed, calls for changing in policing and criminal justice reform. We've seen quite a lot of that locally. I believe Black Lives Matter protests in DeKalb County continue daily for like 2 months at least, and they're still out there regularly. Tenants are calling for reform as well. So there's a lot of people dissatisfied, right? So do you both support calls for criminal justice reform and law enforcement changes that we've seen proposed by local activists? We've seen calls to rebudget police dollars, demilitarize them, reallocate funding to social services. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you foresee happening, if anything, at the state level? And we'll let Jeff answer first. Who answered first last time?
Paul, I did first last time. Paul,
Okay.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff.
You bet. We'll do Paul first.
All right. So yes, as I said, I've heard a lot of what our local BLM people have been saying, and a lot of what they're proposing, I think, are really good ideas. Now, I want to preface my statements by saying I appreciate greatly the good work that most of our police officers, most of our sheriff's officers and deputies are doing. This is not an easy job. These folks tend to see the worst in people. I can see where it might be easy to get a little jaded by doing that type of work day in and day out. Most of the officers and deputies I've ever interacted with have been nothing but professional. They've been friendly. Of course, I'm a white person, and that might make a bit of a difference. But there is, among some people, some officers and some police departments throughout the country, it seems, an us versus them mentality. Most police cars say to protect and serve. And we need to remember, the police need to remember that they are here to protect and serve the communities where they're doing their policing. And that's a bit of a different mindset than this war against crime that a lot of people might want to talk about. Yes, we need to fight crime, but not everybody you interact with as a police officer is a criminal. And a lot of people who occasionally do bad things are not necessarily bad people, but they're just in a bad spot at that particular time. We need to recognize that. We need, so the idea of better screening of potential police officers, people who understand what I would think the appropriate role of the police to protect and serve, rather than us versus them. We get a lot of police officers from the military. I'm thrilled that we can provide jobs to vets. They deserve them above everybody else. But again, you know, if you're coming out of a war situation, very different mentality required for that than there is for taking care of the people in your charge. We just need to make sure that people are properly screened, that they get the proper training to understand best what the proper role of police is in our community. You know, we need to have zero tolerance for officers who abuse their rights or their badge and put citizens at unnecessary risk. A lot of the situations that police are called to, domestic squabbles, etc., are perhaps better served by having a social worker, somebody trained in these situations. Send police and a social worker to these. I know that the Cal Police are doing this. And so when people say defund the police, they don't mean we're not, a lot of people, I mean, it means different things to different people. When I hear it, it means to me, as you said, maybe we redirect some of the money we're spending on enforcement and try to work on mitigation and defusing situations. Have people who are trained specifically for those tasks go out on these calls with police and de-escalate rather than see something turn into a bad situation or making a bad situation worse. So, you know, in terms of policing, again, I think the vast majority of police out there are doing a good job. They're doing it well. But you know, the few bad apples can really spoil it for everybody else. And we need to make sure that those bad apples are held accountable for their actions. And we need to try to weed them out before they're ever given the opportunity to create problems.
All right, Jeff, and same question. Do you support calls for criminal justice reform and law enforcement changes? And what are your thoughts on rebudgeting police dollars, and especially in the lens of what we've seen locally?
Yeah. So first thing I want to say is I'm a grandson of Bob Keicher, and he was a proud City of Geneva police officer and a Kane County police officer for a number of years before he went off and did other things. I value the work that our police officers do, but we're in a time right now where they're being asked to do things that they never really were supposed to be doing, right? They're getting into areas that really are beyond policing and are more into the social work and the sociology. I was very excited about the project that Northwestern, and I believe it was the City of DeKalb Fire Department, was working on a couple of years ago, where they had like a social services ambulance able to go out and respond to some of these issues that police and fire departments don't need to be involved in. And I've kept an eye on House Bill 5009, which is doing something similar. It's establishing 11 different EMS zones in the state of Illinois. The ability to set up parameters to install these so that we can have local units of government more responsive to things that don't need a police presence that are there. Criminal justice reform, if you look at the numbers don't lie, right? We need to be working aggressively towards resolving these situations. It's one of the reasons I voted for and was a supporter of alteration to the reasons that somebody in the state of Illinois could have their license suspended. What we were seeing is so many of these penalties were causing people to lose their license and they couldn't get to work, right? And it was, you know, it was a parking ticket or a speeding ticket or something of that sort. And what we were doing is we were taking a bad situation and making it worse. We were asking somebody to pay for something that now we've taken the opportunity for them to make payment on away for a reason that really didn't make sense. So we have worked towards that. When these horrible tragedies first broke, you know, I did go to an event here in Sycamore. It was 600 people. It was an amazing event, an amazing support. And I was there to support my friends and my family. It's you know, somewhat of a difference when you get some of the national issues that are going on, but on a local issue, those are the people I hang out with. Those are the people I work with. Those are the people that I spend day to day. And so last spring, this past spring, 20, I was very excited for the work caucus, Legislative Black Caucus. He was working on, with state government appropriations, how those contracts are awarded and how we work on not just having African-American ownership trigger what these are, but employment as well, right? We want those job opportunities for folks to help lift them out of here. One of the first calls that I made was to my peer, Representative Maurice West up in Rockford, and another member of the Legislative Black Caucus. And I said, first, Maurice, what should I be doing? I'm a bald, middle-aged white guy. I get it, right? I understand that there are issues that we need to address. And his advice to me that was so powerful is he said, Jeff, let us vent. Let us vent. Don't step in and try to tell us how we should feel or what we should be doing. Allow us an opportunity to get our feelings out there and to create an environment where we can embrace change and work forward. And so the type of change that we're looking for would be, a standardized use of force policy. That we have a broader availability of body cameras, but coupled with that, we also need to resolve some of the FOIA and privacy issues with video, because for every hour of video that somebody requests, it's 3 hours of review process for that police department. And that takes officers off the street and administrators in their office that aren't doing other things to help protect us. So we need to address that. We also need to support in Illinois the FBI National Use of Force database so that we know when somebody is using force at a local level. And we need to, in my opinion, we've got a great model here in Sycamore for our school resource officers. We need to continue to allow that to be a local decision. And we saw that in the city of Chicago when they said we want to pull all the resource officers out of the schools. There was pushback in a number of schools of we value what they're doing here. We've seen what they're doing here. We need to allow that local unit of control. So that would be my hope for this. And we need to continue to look forward at how we make sure that disproportionate impact isn't felt within communities where it's already difficult to get a leg up. So one of the other phone calls that I made early on in June was I talked to the statewide labor unions about what programs and protocols they have in place, not only for diversity training and bringing people into the workforce, but how do they recruit? How do we get them into DeKalb to recruit and build towards some of these wonderful jobs that are available in the area that could easily be filled with a little bit of technical training and some upbringing? So we're still drilling down on that with COVID. It's been a little bit of a challenge, but bringing in partners like Northern Illinois University, Kishwaukee College, and Waubonsie, that's the first step forward, making sure that we have invested members of our community of all colors and stripes, because that's what America is about. It's a melting pot. And with that melting pot, we all bring our own baggage, and honest, full disclosure of what that baggage is needs to be step one. Solving the problem needs to be step two.
Well, thank you both for joining us this morning. We do appreciate it. Just a reminder to our viewers, obviously the election is November 3rd. Early voting starts September 24th, and we definitely encourage everyone to vote. So thank you so much for your time, Jeff, and Paul, and Jim.
Thank you all.
Great meeting you.